Total ATP Productions from Glycolytic Energy System. You may be curious why the ETC supports electron flow from NADH to oxygen. The answer lies in understanding the reduction potential of the electron transfer component of the ETC. The reduction potential of a species is its tendency to gain electron and get reduced. It is measured in millivolts. Larger positive value of reduction potential are indicative of a greater tendency to get reduced. Oxygen reduction potential is around 708 millivolts, and protons reduction potential is around minus 400 millivolts. As electrons flow through the ETC, they progress to molecules that have an increasing reduction potential, essentially directing electron flow toward the final electron receiver that has the largest reduction potential, which is oxygen. And for every pair of electron transport to the ETC by a molecule of NADH, 3 ATP are generated. For each pair of electrons transferred by FADH2, 2 ATP are generated. This electron flow also reveals how important oxygen is for the ETC. When there is a lack of available oxygen, there is a constrained electron flow, which means less NADH and FADH electron transfer, meaning less NAD plus and FAD regeneration. A lack of NAD plus and FAD in the mitochondria would impair the TCA cycle and eventually back up to constraining the operation of the electron and proton shuttle between the cytosol and mitochondria, causing constraint to substrate flux through glycolysis. This would mean that pyruvate must be converted to lactate to regenerate NAD plus for continued glycolytic flux. And depending on the rate of ATP demand, added ATP regeneration would need to come from the phosphagen system. Obviously, inadequate oxygen supply for too long would cause cell and organism death due to the inability to regenerate adequate cellular ATP. What is our total ATP production from one glucose molecule? These are reference for you to count the number of ATP production. So glycolysis, stage 2, carbohydrate metabolism, and TCA cycle. Glycolysis, stage 1, the net ATP yield is 2 ATP. And since NADH plus proton shuttle, each electron and proton to FAD, reducing FAD to FADH2. The net yield is 4 ATP in the ETC, right? Conversion of pyruvate to acetyl coenzyme A at stage 2. We do not produce any ATP in this stage. However, the two molecules of NADH plus proton will yield 6 ATP in the ETC. TCA cycle, stage 3. When calculating the total ATP in the TCA cycle, you should remember that there are two acetyl coenzyme A molecules. So ATP is made one place in the TCA, and with 2 turns of the cycle, the ATP yield is 2. NADH plus proton is produced 6 times from the 2 acetyl coenzyme A, so yielding 18 ATP in the ETC. A total of 2 FADH2 are yielded from the 2 acetyl coenzyme A, thus yield 4 ATP. Therefore, the total ATP from one molecule of glucose is 36 ATP. What is our total ATP production from one glycogen molecule? Remember that glycolysis can commence with either blood glucose or intramuscular glycogen, with muscle glycogen being the predominant source of glucose 6-phosphate during moderate to intense exercise. Glycolysis, which occurs in the cytosol of a muscle fiber and therefore does not involve mitochondrial respiration, produces 2 pyruvate molecules, 2 NADH and 2 proton and either 2 or 3 ATP depend on the glucose or glycogen source of the glucose 6-phosphate respectively. However, to be totally correct about this, muscle glycogen costs 1 ATP per glucose addition due to the hexokinase reaction, which happen during rest condition. Thus, the distinction of 1 ATP difference is made here as during exercise, this added ATP cost no longer exists. Muscle glycogen is therefore an effective means to store glucose with a small metabolic cost being paid at rest when there is ample ATP regeneration via mitochondrial respiration. The added benefit of intramuscular glycogen store is to make glycolysis more net ATP releasing during the higher ATP demand of exercise. This is about the total ATP production of one glycogen. The only difference is stage 1's ATP production is 3 ATP. Therefore, the total ATP from one molecule of glycogen is 37 ATP.